Michael.
Yes,
Syrkus?
Syrkus. Yes, sir.
Syrkus. All right, I wasn't sure.
Sounds exactly like it doesn't look.
So you are running for.
I'm running for County Commission District 5.
Who are you running against, Mike?
So currently the position is held by Ed Campy, but very important distinction I want to tell everybody is that I'm not running against a person in particular, but I'm running against an idea that we've had here in the county for a long time. This idea of select commissioners trying to build their legacy and spending tax dollars that we simply don't have. We really need to get away from this idea of a very small elite group in our county making decisions and doing it off of your pocketbook and my pocketbook. Instead, we need to get back to the community heritage we've had and start living within our means.
Who are you running against?
I am running against Ed Campy.
So what is that seat again?
That is District 5 County Commissioner.
And what sort of geographic territory?
District 5 encompasses essentially all of Palm City. You run out from the river heading west towards just outside the village of Indiantown. And then from county line south.
How long has Ed been in that seat?
Ed has been in this seat over the last 2 terms, so 8 years. And then there was also a 4-year term he did from, I believe it was 2008 to 2012. So he kind of pulled a Teddy Roosevelt, did a little bit, left, and came back.
Ed's smooth, man.
Ed is smooth. The guy,
I like him.
He's a professional politician. And
I don't like how he
does.
How he votes necessarily, but he's a good guy. He's very smooth. He's very charismatic. He's easy to like.
And that's why I tell people it's not that I'm running against a person in particular. Right. He has a philosophy and an ideology that he believes in, and he has supporters, and more power to them. But I have a philosophy that I believe in, and I believe that it's important. It's a message to share with the community. I'm very fortunate to see that a lot of the communities has gotten behind us and supports it as well.
As a matter of distinction, not criticizing Ed or comparing, but just as a matter of distinction, how would you characterize his philosophy, how he's voted, and then sort of,
we have two very distinct...
Oppositionally, how are you different?
We have two very distinct ideas in Martin County, and this has a lot to do with our population growth over the last 20 years, 30 years or so. We have traditional people that have been here in Martin County, the heritage that I'm looking to support. These are people that have been here for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. We're living this more rural lifestyle, this more relaxed lifestyle, trying to enjoy what so many people call the Martin County difference, right? We're not Palm Beach. We're not St. Lucie. We don't have all these bells and whistles that a lot of these larger metropolitan areas have. And that's something that we enjoy. We like that small town charm, that small town feel. Now, Ed, on the other hand, I perceive to have a very different appeal. He enjoys having these amenities. He enjoys providing them. And we have a lot of people in the community that have transplanted here from out of the area.
When you say amenities, what do you mean?
Well, golf course, for example. Yeah. The golf course had a major revamp a few years back. Ed was also very, I hate to say cheerleader because it sounds derogatory, but he was very impassioned. Advocate. There you go. Thank you. See, I told you I'm not a professional politician.
It's all right. Just being gracious, right?
He was a great advocate on behalf of the water park. Yeah. And there are people that enjoy the water park. There are people that enjoy the golf course, and that's fantastic. But these are higher end amenities that don't necessarily fit the charm of our community.
Rural.
Exactly. Rural communities don't have water parks. And that's where you kind of have to ask that question philosophically. Which one do we want to be? Do we want to be this rural heritage-based community, or do we want to be progressing, and I use that term very loosely, progressing, do we want to become one of these minor metropolitan areas? And I personally don't want to do that. I think the majority of our community doesn't want to do that. We enjoy our small town rural heritage that we have here in the community. And we've seen in the last 15 years or so a very steep and quick progression into a mini Miami or a mini Fort Lauderdale, Port St. Lucie. It's becoming very hard to distinguish between these areas. That difference has faded quickly because we're in a race to find all these new bells and whistles and amenities to keep up with the Joneses to our north and south. And that's not what we're here for. It's not what Martin County wants.
It does seem like in the past you had intentionally, city and county leadership that was trying to be distinct from Port St. Lucie or West Palm. Like, that was the brand.
Absolutely.
All decisions that were coming forward were being weighed out. You had people, community leaders. It wasn't just commissioners. You had like Harry and the Natives, and you had different people who were advocating for keeping that rural charm and
which I'm very, very happy to see. We're starting to see a resurgence in that.
Yes.
There are a lot of people in the community that are starting to step up to the plate because, and I'll be the first to say, I'm one of those people. Apathy starts to take place. It becomes very discouraging over time when you're advocating for something and it just goes nowhere and you're ignored. And a lot of us fall into that. We're human. We're fallible. It happens. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a time period where people are stepping up to the plate, and we've been taking a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. They've been taking of us, and it's gotten to the point where we have so much taken away, and we start to see how much has been overdeveloped. We start to see how fiscally constrained we are because we're spending just literally hundreds of millions of dollars we do not have. And it's coming out of people's pocketbooks to where you can't enjoy that Martin County difference, the little bit that's left. You can't physically or financially enjoy it anymore. Or you can't even enjoy a heritage lifestyle if you have animals. You're getting squeezed out by overdevelopment around you. You can't propagate this idea that your family's done for generations. You can't do it anymore because of how much the world's changed around you.
Give me some specifics for, how Ed has voted, how that seat 5 is voted, and how it would be different if you were in it.
So I would just highlight, yes, sir.
From like a customer service, business standpoint.
This is your option A, this is your option B.
What am I buying?
Sure. Right. Forward planning. If I were to boil it down to one thing, it'd be forward planning.
What does that mean?
With our current commission, and Ed is very much in this realm, there's a reactionary stance. So much of what we do is reactionary. And I'll use the example of that $4 million land purchase on 714. We have a comprehensive plan, the CRA development plan, where the project in place was a 90 unit apartment complex. It fell 100% within the realm of what the CRA designated for that area. They said, this is going to be our downtown corridor. So, hey, that's cool. It's within the boundaries of what we want. And then a very vocal minority of people came out and said, we don't want to see the apartments there. That's way too many, and it just does not fit. And as a result, we spent $4 million and borrowed for 10 years, which means your 6 acres of land will come out to almost $900,000 an acre. Taxpayer dollars just out of District 5 in the CRA. So we spent this money to buy off the developer, had the land rolled into the county's pocketbook. But yet we haven't done anything to change the zoning that was in place that allowed that to happen to begin with. We haven't had any question whatsoever of how we want to avoid this from happening in the future. And we don't even know how we want to use that land now. And as a result of that, we look at septic to sewer conversions, and we look at some of these, the CIP or your infrastructure projects in the old Palm City CRA. They're all backburnered because now there's no money left for any of it. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a question of forward planning. Do we want to be reactionary on everything, or do we want to plan in advance and say, hey, we have a CRA plan that maybe it's faulty, so let's fix the CRA. Or if it's not faulty, that's fine too, but then you got to follow your plan. If you make your bed, you got to sleep in it.
What would you do different to have avoided that?
I think we need to take a look at the CRA itself. I personally believe that 714 corridor should not be part of the old Palm City CRA, especially when we take a look at how it became part of the CRA to begin with.
For people who don't know what a CRA means, what the implications of being labeled a CRA?
Sure. Yeah. So a CRA is essentially it stands for Community Redevelopment Area. And what these areas are specifically targeted zones where you take your incremental taxes. Taxes get redeveloped into a very specific area to bring it up. I'm trying to think of the nicest way to say this, but usually these areas are
blighted.
There you go. That's a very nice way. I was going to say underutilized.
I got you.
See? Some of these areas that need that special attention. So you set boundaries and you plan out a long-term plan of how you're going to develop that area into a new downtown corridor is one of the best examples a lot of people have. You turn this into the focal point of that area. So in Old Palm City, for example, the CRA is your map road from 714, the county road, down to 714, the state road, in between the two. And about 15 years ago or so, it was extended from Map Road west down 714 until you hit Berry Road, which is where you see Townie's Tavern, Hurricanes for people that drive that corridor. And this was done to encourage a grocery store to be brought in, because the current zoning at the time did not allow for a grocery store to be put in. And the community said they needed a new grocery store. So I understand I understand the need. Palm City had grown rapidly in the early 2000s, and there was a need for more services. Understand completely. Instead of addressing the issue, we just said we're going to blanket roll the CRA down 714 to Berry Road, and that whole area became part of that redevelopment plan, which means in a CRA you have heightened, what do they call that? Kind of like in your comp plan, you have heightened unit development. You have a higher concentration of density. That's where my brain was trying to go. You have a higher concentration.
That's a very important word.
Density,
right? So
brain, also an important word.
Where if you were not necessarily in that CRA, there would be a certain expectation.
Exactly.
Even outside beyond the code, like expectation of what that density should be. Once it's in the CRA and we're redeveloping and we're building,
you have a much higher density for your CRAs. Exactly. This is where you're supposed to concentrate the volume of your people. This is, when you visualize this idea of the walkable communities, or if you visualize this idea of the downtown district where you live on the second story and you buy your food in the bodega on the first floor. These are some of the ideas that you find in these highly densely or more densely populated areas. So when you extend that out down 714, that's what you're doing. You're encouraging a higher density population.
Which would be the antithesis of rural?
It would be. Good word. Opposite. See,
it's
again.
The exact opposite of rural?
The exact opposite. That's precisely it. And it makes you question how much forward planning went into that original decision. And if that is not in line with what the community wants or community desires, then we need to address that. We can't keep kicking the ball down the field and saying, well, we're not going to change the CRA district back to what it originally was. We're going to leave it as it is, but instead we're going to buy off this section of property from developers and we'll figure out what we're going to do with it later. Well, that has a snowball effect to so many other things, because now that's a huge sum of funds that you don't have for other projects that are already pipelined. And I would use the example of the Old Palm City CRA's septic to sewer conversions and the numbered streets. $4 million plus 10 years interest, about $5.5 million at the current interest rates, if it does come to fruition. That's a huge chunk of change for septic sewer conversions, which we all know when you're butted up to the waterways, septic sewer conversions can be extremely important. If you have a failing septic system, where does it go? Adjacent properties. It's gonna seep. So these are all these downhill issues that come to play, because instead of planning in the future, planning for your future and forward planning your actions, you had an immediate reaction.
Oh, they're planning. They're planning, man. It may not be. Well, okay, so here's the thing with the CRAs, right?
Sure.
The government is always, oh man, I don't know how to say this. It's not so negative, but the government.
I like reality. You can be negative if you have to.
Right? Taxes fund the government.
Yeah.
So you want to have your underutilized or blighted or rural areas become higher producers of taxes.
Absolutely.
So, but the problem is historically you had, let's say, the city of Stuart, right? Mm-hmm. The city of Stuart, to combat urban sprawl in the planner philosophy, was pack and stack the city.
Yeah.
Pack and stack the city of Stuart so you could leave the county at large more rural. Mm-hmm. You could have more ag land, more green space, right? That all sounded like a good idea.
Yeah.
But strangely, there's been sort of because of CRAs and trying to increase tax revenue, counties are functioning with CRAs as mini cities.
Absolutely.
So each one of these CRAs is functioning like a mini city of Stuart, where you're trying to pack and stack people. So there ends up being no rural anymore.
Exactly.
And that is antagonistic. It's like a sprawl on steroids. There is no more green space and rural land. And
that's it.
You've increased the tax base, but that you've also killed the golden goose of the rural
why people
nature.
were coming here.
Right.
That's it. And it's unique because you and I have two very different positions in the sense that you're within the city, which
my headaches are small.
I wasn't even going to go that route. So you live in a city where that is, like you just said, that is the intended area. That is your county seat. That is the area that's intended to be your densely packed. That's supposed to be it's supposed to be the city. I live on the countryside. You know, I'm blessed to live on the farm that my father-in-law purchased in '68. And I mean, I still raise poultry, still have horses.
Good.
So I'm coming from a very different perspective where we're looking at the county, like you said, that old rural heritage. And you're coming at a perspective where it is the city development and that higher density.
But even in the city,
it does spread out.
We love
CRAs.
our sprawl. This is confusing sometimes, right? Like we love our residential sprawl, right? We love these single family home neighborhoods that were built in the 50s and 60s. People like to have a yard. People don't necessarily want to live in condos and townhouses. And when you have the kind of infrastructure that the city has, where you have narrow roads and not a lot of them, if you want to be able to navigate safely, you can't fully urbanize the city. You know, it's geography. Well, and similar with the CRAs, right? Like whether it's Salerno or Palm City, or
from a philosophical standpoint, when we talk about that sprawl, it's funny you should bring up neighborhoods from the 50s because we look at sprawl from a very myopic position. You know, we're looking at sprawl in the last 20 years, but we're referencing a time period that was 70 years ago.
Right.
So it also depends very, very much where your starting point is going to be, which goes to that point of forward planning. If you're going to have your forward planning, you can build out 10 options in front of you. If you're reactionary, you have two options, yes or no, and you're going to run with it. And you're going to take your house of cards as they fall.
So how would you forward plan, right? Because you'll get the pushback that property owners, you know, developers, they do what they want with their property. You know,
property owners have rights. Right? There's no doubt about it.
So how do you truly plan a community in light of that, right?
Our decisions right now, especially when it actually gets to the board to vote on, it's an important distinction to recognize that if you are a property owner and you are falling within what the codes already established, you'll never go in front of the commission.
Right.
I mean, essentially, we have a set of plans in front of us that says this is what you can do with your land. The land that you bought, you knew that's what you could do with it. So if you're given an inch, even if you live in an area that encourages this type of
like
rapid development,
like Palm City, okay?
Yeah.
So those apartments, right? By right, they could build the apartments.
Absolutely.
Right. So what would you try to rezone?
See, I think the CRA needs to be shrunk back. I do not think the CRA should have extended down 714.
But even if it wasn't a CRA, right, with that property,
if it wasn't a CRA, they would revert back to the county's comp plan, which is a much smaller volume of density.
Parcel specifically, that parcel would still carry the future land use and zoning to be able to build apartments there, right?
It could do apartments, but to a much lower density.
Okay.
So instead of worrying about 90 apartments, I'd have to look at that particular zoning, but the majority of it in that area is like five to an acre.
Yes.
As opposed to, I mean, that was 90
so the CRA
6 acres.
Created an overlay that changed the land use and zoning?
Exactly. So every CRA has within it its own,
not just encouraging the financial.
Not just encouraging financial, but it has like a little mini comp plan, I guess is a good way to say it. It's very particular in what you can do, what you can't do, to the point where some CRAs will tell you the color you're going to paint the building and the style. You know, there are CRAs that'll tell you we love Mediterranean styles, so you're going to love it too.
The problem too is now if I'm the surrounding land owners to that deal that just went down, all I'm going to do is threaten apartments.
You're talking about
so in Palm City, right? If I'm the parcel that just got bought by the county, because people didn't want apartments there, so I made a lot of money on that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
If I'm the guy next door, hey, I'm
I'm
gonna build apartments.
Yeah.
Unless you guys.
But you can buy me, and I don't have to anymore. You know, and that is
kind of create a chain there where
that threat was brought up, not particular to that parcel, but countywide. That threat was brought up, especially the old Port Salerno CRA. It's not important who, but I had a gentleman come up to me and say, I'm a landowner down here. Why don't I sell my land? And I begged and pleaded, said, listen, it's a taxpayer in Martin County. Please don't do that. We just got stuck 30 seconds ago. But I get where people would do that.
With CRAs, so I know from the city's perspective, the city benefits from a CRA because the city actually collects the difference in the improvement value from like an ad valorem standpoint, including the county's portion of that. So it's very advantageous for the city to have a CRA that redevelops. But what is besides just generally increasing the taxable value of the property, is there state benefit? Like, is there a change? What really benefits the county?
What I see to be the benefit to the county is that with that, you just talked about that difference in tax, right? When you establish the CRA, for those listening at home, when you establish the CRA, you have a base taxable income or base taxable value. And the more you improve it, the more the appraised value is.
So there's no like state incentive or anything else. It's just increasing the value for ad valorem.
I don't know of any state incentive personally. There's the ad valorem increase. A lot of it get reintroduced back into the CRA, 65%, but that's a 35% ad valorem increase going into the county as well. I would think from a philosophical standpoint, there are people that are more.
I don't know enough about how the county works, but yeah.
And that's kind of my position with the city. I have to. I'm starting to learn with the city. It's funny the dichotomy between the two. You would think as the county chair, I would have had more understanding of the city, but I've enjoyed it. It's become a great educational experience, but you see such a difference between the two. But anyhow, with the CRAs, it's just the financial benefit of seeing that increased taxable value, but also I would perceive it to be the philosophical benefit for those who support growth and development, or a heavier, denser growth and development. These are little microcosms where, like you said, you're building mini cities. You're sprawling mini cities outside of what we consider the traditional county seat or your traditional city. So having that gives you the opportunity to mold it into what you might want to see that to be. And I think if memory serves correct, all 5 of our commissioners have at least one CRA inside of their district. I think one commissioner has 2, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 3 and 1. That's the District 3 and District 1. I think they both have 2 CRAs. But this gives you a little microcosm where you can kind of mold them. The CRA groups do this, but also the commissioners, you can kind of mold them into what you might want to see in the future as little mini cities in your own district.
My understanding is you're trying to redevelop, let's say Map Road, right?
Okay.
You're turning Map Road into a complete street where the sidewalks are wider. Maybe even you slow down traffic like Colorado. You have the trees, on-street parking and that whole thing, in an attempt you're making it nicer so that you are trying to encourage the redevelopment of that property.
Absolutely. So what you're doing is you're using the tax dollars from that increase, and it's not just from that increase. There's other tax revenues that go into them, but you're using tax dollars to redevelop that area to make it more picturesque for new businesses to come in, for new residents to build out living spaces. Essentially what you're doing is you're investing in the area to build it out later.
But here's my issue, right? Maybe yours is similar too, is if I'm trying to increase the property value by building complete streets so that a developer comes in and builds brand new commercial space or residential space, it does increase the taxable value, but it makes it much harder for people who have lived here historically to either rent that commercial space that gets built or buy it, because it's going to be very expensive. It's new. It does have a higher taxable value, so that brings more money into the government.
Yep.
But you are simultaneously
more cost on the private side,
creating a difficult entry for, like, if you're the pizza place that's on Map Road, or what happens is those
gentrify
taxes
the crap out everybody around you.
Gentrify all the people who live there, the ability to have a pizza. Like if I'm a small little practice, right? Like if all of a sudden, this street is turning into some huge thing, and my landlord is like, you know what, it's been a fun ride, but I can get 10x for this parcel now. Since they did this, you go find somewhere else to go, and now you've just kind of driven out all the local mom and pop.
Absolutely, that's exactly what happens when you increase the value.
For ad valorem.
Yep, when you're increasing that value to get that immediate ad valorem increase, or by immediate short term 4, 5, 10 years or whatever. When you're getting that ad valorem increase, it's great the government gets the money, but that is an increased cost to the private sector. Now, you and I, the only dealings we're going to have with the government on a financial standpoint is going to be when the bill comes in. But on the first of the month, you got to make sure that your rent's paid. Otherwise, pack up the business, time to roll. So the private sector is going to have to absorb that cost. And how they can do it, they're going to roll it downhill to you, the consumer. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the CRAs. A great example is an HOA. If you live in an HOA, take a look at your HOA dues. What happens when property taxes go up? Because, hey, we got these great new bells and whistles, and you got all these amenities all around you, but it's time to pay the piper on the amenities. The bill goes up. Well, you can only pay so much before you move to a new community because you couldn't afford the old.
And I think the deeper questions, instead of following this, it's not a tradition, but it's like a popular mode of operation of CRAs and doing this, urbanism thing, is do the people who even live here that pay taxes and vote, do they even want CRAs to redevelop? And why do you need so much money to run the government? Shouldn't you run a leaner, skinnier government, spend less money so that you're not gentrifying small business owners and residents who live here?
Absolutely.
Just to drag in foreign investors or, large chains or, who can afford to. Sure, it'd be nice to have a Whole Foods, but I also like being able to drive around here.
Yeah. Well, and
have affordable, commercial rent. Or
going back to that philosophy earlier, is it the rural heritage and that Martin County difference, or do we want to be a perfection mini micro city, or the mini metropolitans that mirror that to the north and the south?
So your
two
first
very different ideas.
Your first, motion as commissioner would be to undo the CRA in Palm City for your people.
So I'd say it's not
scale it back or something.
It would be to scale it back. Yeah. It would be to scale back. I'm not saying eliminate it because there is a constituency that likes to see these CRAs.
The business development.
Exactly. But it has to be contained as well. We can't let them run rampant because just like you have the city of Stewart and everything around it is sprawled around, when you create the mini cities of the CRAs, you got to sprawl around that as well. So you have to make the two plans jive together. And that's what we don't have right now. We extended the CRA out so we can make a special exemption for one necessity at a time, opened up the floodgates to anything else in the meantime. If you don't plan that out and forward plan that out, then you're caught reaction.
What do you think about Newfield? What they're doing off of Citrus? And
so
what are your thoughts?
I tip my hat to the people in Newfield. They spend a lot of time selling it to the community. And that's all well and good for them. From a business standpoint, that was very smart. I think we're creating a huge, it's the city of Stewart. We're creating it in Palm City, sitting on.
Do you know how many units it's going to be?
I think their total build out was like 20,000 heads, people, that is. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood about 20,000 people over a 10-year build out. So, which, remind me, the city of Stewart's population is like 20,000, 30,000.
Forever it was 17, and now we're up to like, because we approved 3,000 units in 4 years.
Okay.
We're going to be at something like 25. I think we might be at 23 right now.
So you figure Newfield, if they execute the entire build out over a 10-year period, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it was close to 20,000 person.
You know your data though. I feel like I can lean on you, and you'll be pretty close.
Well, and I'd tell you one thing I like to do is I go by afterwards, and I like to relook things up. So when you go to post this online, I'll be sure to be putting in there, hey, I made a mistake, because I'm a man and I'm fallible like everybody else.
Yeah,
so
I don't think people expect perfection, but
so it's important to follow up.
The gist of a thing, you should know what you're talking about.
There you go. But yeah, so Newfield, it's essentially building a whole new Stewart out on the county line on the north end. And this is, who was the group? Oh, there's someone on social media. More cows, less condos. And it cracks me up because, there you go. And it cracks me up because she's not wrong. I was driving down Pratt Whitney yesterday, heading to a job site in Palm Beach Gardens. And it just struck me because I had friends that ran cattle off of that land. And I'm looking at the houses that are there now. And it's amazing how quickly we went from that, from cows to condos. And it seems like that ball is rolling downhill so fast at this point, you almost question whether you can catch it or not. But we're going to try. That's for sure.
So that's a lot of human beings. I'm trying to pull it up here. If I can even find it.
Yeah, if you could find it, I'd love to know. It's in the village of Indiantown.
It seems like it's been characterized as very rural, but that's a lot of.
It's a huge plot of land, and there's a great volume of that land.
How many acres is it?
I don't have the acres off the top of my head, but I believe their build out is only 30 to 40% of the physical footprint.
But they gave them the density for the whole piece
because they're putting it extremely dense into that walkable
and the
community
other part's,
idea.
And I don't want to get sued, but the other part is swamp.
I can't
right?
afford to get sued.
Right. The other part's swamp, so is it even really buildable?
And that's a great question in itself. So there's a lot of land that's put into environmental easement and protection, whether it's because it's unbuildable by design of where they're going to locate the heavily dense portion, or whether that's just merely a matter of this is where we want to put the dense portion to begin with. That I couldn't tell you. I'm not so in depth on the decision-making process and any of that. But essentially a large footprint of this is going to be left in environmental easements and left open-aired. And it's just going to be heavily, heavily densely populated in where it does get developed. And there's also industrial aspect as well. Industrial, commercial, residential. It really is its own micro city off of North Citrus. Which I'm hoping, seeing as how Citrus connects into St. Lucie Boulevard, I would love to see their commercial sector thrive up there, and they can stop heading south on Citrus to 714. That would be a blessing.
I mean, do you really think that's possible, that this would not increase the traffic on a 714, adding 20,000 people or whatever it is?
Realistically, I don't think it's going to have any perceivable benefit.
Do you think they're just going to hang out in their new city? They're not ever going to come into Stewart?
I guess my perspective was I would hope that the commercial and industrial sector that's going to be developed into Newfield would capture the people that are coming in from St. Lucie West now. So we have a huge population of people driving from St. Lucie into Martin County for business, for work. Because let's be honest, you can't afford to live in Martin County, but we do have jobs that you can work at. So we have people that live in St. Lucie come here for work and then go back home again. So making lemonade out of lemons, if we're going to have this major industrial and commercial sector developed up on the county line, I really hope their industrial and commercial sector thrives and incorporates all those people coming from St. Lucie.
The nice part about getting elected is you can critique these projects and you won't get sued personally. You do have a certain amount of limited exposure.
I just liked our county.
But as a private citizen,
for
you
once.
You can't speak to any of these things.
I would love to see our county not getting sued so often. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a lot to ask, but I would think that's a reasonable desire. Stop doing things that earn you a lawsuit.
Well, all right. So I'll counter that, right? So part of it is if you push back against developers and you vote no, right? That is historically the argument for why you can't say no, is you don't want to get sued, right? Even though nobody is guaranteed conditional use, there'll always be the threat that, a judge could get in front of a judge and that judge may find you saying no unreasonable.
And so again, going back to that philosophical point. So if somebody comes in front of you
what they
as
always
a commissioner,
that's what they'll always lean. If you start pressing them about any of these projects that they've approved about Story or Newfield or any of this stuff, that's what they're going to, we don't.
Well, so now we look at whether it is, as I throw my microphone around, now we're looking at whether it's just a threat that you're going to get sued, or is there a reasonable expectation to get sued? So if they come in front of you as a commissioner, they're asking for something special. We talked about how if you fall within the code, then you're not going to go in front of the board. But if you're looking for something special, if you're given an inch and you're trying to take a mile,
right?
Is it reasonable to believe in the threat of a lawsuit, or are they just throwing words at you, hoping you'll cower?
Right.
Because that's what it becomes. I mean, as a commissioner, you're going to voice your opinion. You have every right to do so. If you're doing that based off of what your legal rights are, for example, are you forced into giving them special permissions? Absolutely not.
I only go into that nuance to, because if you start talking about keeping it more rural, that's what you're going to hear. Isn't that same way that you said, let's not get sued? Yeah. Well, they're going to be like, well, then you better start learning how to vote yes.
Well, and that's so when
no matter what.
In my mind's eye, as we talk about not getting sued, I think about the pet shop ban, for example, something like that, because this is something that there was no. It's not like development where you're asking for those special permissions, where you have absolute authority to say, no, we're not giving you extra. You bought the land with a specific usage. I'm not getting in your way of usage. You do what you want to do with that usage.
Right.
So if you're going to say, well, you give me my special permission or I'm going to sue you. Okay, well, getting sued doesn't necessarily mean going to trial or there is expenditures. I'm not saying there's not. But there's very different expenditure.
Pricey. Lawyers are not cheap.
They are not. Well, that's one good thing about having lawyers on staff. I mean, you're already paying them. So, and if it's something quick where you can turn around and say to the judge, hey, listen.
But if you pay their attorney's fees, I mean.
Well, and see, when you're talking about reimbursing somebody's attorney's fees, this also comes into play as to whether they were reasonable in their expectation to begin with. Mm-hmm. Special permission is not a reasonable expectation. I mean, maybe we've had history of it, and that's all. I mean, that's onto other people's shoulders.
I'm just playing devil's advocate with you.
Oh, no, and well, knowing your voting history.
You know where I'm at.
Yeah, knowing your voting history, I absolutely know that, you and I are in the same boat on this. But it is a threat. You've seen it how many times?
So just getting a sense of, who you are and what you're about.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to keep your bones? Because something that I've seen that happens is, a person will get in there and they campaigned for a certain kind of a thing, a certain kind of philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. And then they get in there and they get sort of absorbed into the Borg. They become, and it's very seductive and easy to do. It's very easy because you have a lot to learn, right? You don't know about, there's a lot that you do know, but then when you start sitting down with staff and you're learning and understanding the history of projects and things, and it's very easy for that learning curve to start to migrate into towing the line and going along with every, and losing that philosophy of, why people voted for you. So will you have the bones?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you, every person you're going to ask that's going to give you the same answer. They're going to tell you absolutely. And,
because there's nothing more defeating than having hope in a candidate.
What I would substantiate my answer with, I tell you absolutely, and I say that with absolute conviction, knowing that every politician is going to give you the same line and 99% of them are going to fail you. I tell you absolutely because I didn't want to do this, to be quite frank with you. This is never something I had any interest or draw to. I've been in advocacy for almost a decade on the state level, federal level, and a lot of people have seen me here at the county advocating, but I don't want to rule over my fellow man. I had no urge for that. And I dragged my feet for a long time into making this decision because I was hoping and praying somebody else would do it.
Same.
It's not something I want to do. I don't want to tell you how to live your life because you know the variables to your life. But we have a commission currently that doesn't share that philosophy. They have no problems dictating how they want to see things develop in the county based on their perspective. I'm looking to have my kids, my wife, my household. I want to be a big fish in that small pond. That's what I care about. I'm not looking to be the big dog in the county commission. I'm looking to represent what everybody else, or what I perceive the majority of the community wants. They want their heritage. They want their Martin County difference, not because it's something that they want to live just themselves, but they want their kids and their kids' kids to enjoy this as well. And we've seen that is no longer the play. That's no longer a possibility. So when we have people sitting up on the dais that maybe start to change their opinions and start to change their ideas to fit that collective, get along or go along to get along idea, no, because at some point you're going to be out of there and you're going to have to go back to your real life and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your actions. And we already see how that go along, get along has resulted. And that's not something we can substantiate any longer. We're losing that Martin County difference, and that's not.
The seductive part, though, when I say it's seductive, is on any given night, I don't go to county meetings, but in the city, right, there could be, besides the 5 commissioners and manager, an attorney and some staff in there, there might be like 10, max 15 people in that room.
On a busy night, yeah.
Yeah, man. Like 10 people is probably pretty reasonable. 2 or 3,
Yeah, it's an empty chamber most days.
Residents. Helen is always there, and, but we're setting policy for 25,000 people.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? There's like 10 people in there. And I'll tell you who will be there, hell or high water, are the guys and gals getting paid $200 and $300 an hour to be there to represent their client. So you end up having this, and you're there to represent the people. So I'm not trying to indict people for not being there. I get it. you're working.
Exactly.
But who comes in front of you, who you see consistently, who is there every time because they're paid to be there, is the developer, the applicant, his land use attorney or attorneys, team of attorneys all suited up. Yep. Everybody's on the
first two rows on the left every time.
And the traffic person and the architect, and they're all there. Yeah. So it's easy to lose sight of what the average person wants because they've been all over you from the time that hit the agenda. They've been calling you all those applicants and people. Yeah. Oh, let me just show you the project, man. And it's very easy to get drawn into that if you don't have bones.
See, and you see them during your county commission meeting, and they're there. And some of those public hearings, individual projects, depending on the size of the project, you can go through a 45-minute or an hour-long presentation. But you got to drive home at night. You have neighbors that are on the left and right of you. I mean, I think it's a misnomer to suggest that because the constituents are busy at work and you're only seeing the developer or whoever's there for that particular project, just because you're seeing them in that short period of time, you got one meeting every 2 weeks, and a long meeting might be 8, 9, 10 hours. I think the worst the COVID meeting was like a 13-hour marathon. And in 8 years, I've never seen that long of a meeting. But if you're having once every 2 weeks, I mean, there's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I think it's a misnomer to say that because that person's in front of you during the meeting that you lose sight of the others. I think that's
I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm
saying
it's just kind of what ends up. I've noticed it seems to be the trend.
Yeah.
Is that is what people get sucked into. And I also don't mean to characterize, land use attorneys and applicants. I'm not saying that anybody who brings anything in front of you should be but something there's great projects. Yes, sure.
Yeah.
But the projects that, that your neighbors are not happy about.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And that's where it comes to the person,
and what the community overall wants, and not just that person who's going to benefit financially from the yes.
I'm not the kind of guy that strokes other people's egos. Just because, like I said, my wife loves me, my kids think I'm awesome, and that's all I really need in this world. My folks think I'm a pretty decent person, and that's good for me. So I'm not here to stroke an ego or put a feather in your cap. But for example, people know exactly what they're getting out of you. People know what they're getting out of Sarah Hurd.
Right.
There are certain voices, they know exactly what they're getting out of. Now, whether you support that ideology or not, it's completely up to you. But you know what you're getting out of a person. So I know where you're coming from when you say that.
Yep.
But you're trying to illustrate in a vague nature so everybody at home can see. You have these people in front of you, and they're the only ones that are capturing your attention at that time, especially when you're on the dais. That's your job. That's your full-time job. So these people have your captured attention. And when other residents are at home, whether at work, whether taking care of their family, whatever it is, if they're not on the dais or if they're not in front of you, I see where you say how that could slip your mind, but that's a personal decision.
Yep.
As a representative to your constituents, that's up to you. It's a question of your character. Are you going to remember that? You said Whole Foods earlier. Chuck and Chicken Tuesday. I love it. It's the only way I can afford Whole Foods. That's why I end up at Aldi. And we think about our community, and you got to keep in your mind's eye, how many people are at the Whole Foods parking lot versus how many people are reaching for a quarter at Aldi.
Yeah.
And if you've been to an Aldi on a Saturday in Martin County, you'll know that there is a huge volume of constituents there. It's not a place to get a parking spot. So these are the things you got to keep in your mind when you're on that dais. It's not just the guy in front of you giving his presentation. They deserve your attention. You got to hear the details, and you need to contemplate those details before making a decision. But you also keep in your mind's eye that there are 160,000 people in Martin County, not just that one person making one request.
Exactly. So then, following that line of thinking of, embodying the brand that you represented in your campaigning, how would you characterize, your campaign for what you intend to advocate for and champion if you get that seat? What can people hold you accountable to in terms of, and every project has different, and I don't mean project specific, but like
just what's the general,
if you had to pick, what am I going to, so people will be able to say, I know what I got with Mike.
When you vote for Mike, this is what you need. You need to get someone that's asking questions first and foremost, because that to me is our fatal flaw currently. We are not asking any type of questioning. Everything is a rubber stamp that comes in front of the county administrator. Everything's a rubber stamp. When staff says, staff recommends, that's what the county commission goes with. Staff recommended it, so we're going to do it. And unfortunately, there's a chicken that comes before the egg kind of situation there, because if you recall 2 weeks ago, or for those listening, you might recall 2 weeks ago, the county administrator said, what's your priorities for the year? We need to build out a schedule, figure out what we want to do. Well, the administrator and the lawyers, they both report to the commission to a very large degree. They have a job to do, but the commission, they work at the pleasure of the commission, essentially.
Yes.
So if the commission says these are my priorities, absolutely, the administrator and lawyers are going to come back with an avenue to achieve your priorities. And then the commission says, oh, well, staff recommended it, so we're going to go for it. Well, what happened to asking a question in the meantime? Because what you said, very blanket or very myopic goal, I want to build a dog park. Okay, well, staff's going to give you the roadmap to build a dog park. Whether it's converting an underutilized soccer field at a park at an existing public park into a dog park to achieve that goal, or whether you're going to go buy 7,000 acres for $20 billion and you're going to build out the fanciest dog park America's ever seen, those are two very extreme options. Mm-hmm. The staff's going to bring you one of those two options, and you need to ask the question, which option do I have in front of me? Is it pragmatic? Do we have the funds to make this happen? Is there a need or a necessity for this in the community? Is that properly placed? I mean, basic questions that you and I would ask because we're, adults.
So my sidebar on this would be that there has been a change in culture from, government, how governments operate, mm-hmm. sort of all the way up the chain. Mm-hmm. Is from local government to federal government, is the staff kind of runs. So historically,
with abdicated responsibility to hired staff.
You had a representative republic, mm-hmm. where the people who are elected are truly driving staff, mm-hmm. And increasingly over time, it seems like all of these unelected that keep growing and growing and growing. Mm-hmm. Nothing against our local staff. They're awesome. But it's how involved are your elected leaders?
Exactly.
Even in the way things, run.
Exactly. That's the chicken before the egg. You have a responsibility as an elected representative. I mean, that's the word's right there. Representative. You're representing your constituency. Each district has about 38,000 people you represent. Mm. For the county, but you have 160,000 in the county wide. You represent these folks. And staff, absolutely, they are the professionals. They're the ones that are the professional engineers. They're the Parks and Rec, professional directors for that, or whatever department you want to think of. But ultimately, if their organizational structure is reporting to the commission, then you have to be an engaged commissioner. You cannot just give a blanket desire, allow staff to come up with a solution, and then you rubber stamp the solution because it achieves the goal. There has to be a two-way street where you are actively involved and actively engaged in the process, because otherwise you end up with, like you said, staff running the show. And it's not to say that staff is necessarily wrong, but there's a very big difference between converting a ballpark into a dog park and buying a bunch of land to build out a new dog park.
It's tough for them too, because often they're
excuse me,
like stuck in the middle between a bunch of people who can't agree.
And that's it. And this is
so
where
they're trying to get a sense of like, what do you want us to do? And then is there any consensus here?
And I struggle to lay this at the feet of Don and Sarah and
right.
George, these staffers. I struggle to lay at their feet because, if you recall with the budgetary meeting going back in September, I mean, Don made it very clear. He said, tell me what you want me to cut.
What I'm going to do.
Tell me what you want me to cut, because we gave you the budget based off of our existing services and everything you've thrown on top. That's resulted in a major tax increase, and now you are mad because it's time to pay the piper. Sarah Hurd said it. She said, you ran up a restaurant bill, it's time to pay the bill. Yep. So, I mean, staff is very much put in a difficult position because they're given the dictates throughout the year, and then all of a sudden, when it comes time to put a lot of micro projects together and put them into one big package, everybody's jaw hits the ground and says, well, how did it get this bad? Because you weren't engaged.
I will give credit to the city commissioners. Mm-hmm. There is a very concise and unified tone of don't increase taxes, don't spend too much money. And it gives Mike Mortel, the administrator, the manager, the ability to have those tough conversations with the various department heads and saying, no, we're not bringing a new person on. We got to figure it out.
Exactly.
Living within your means. We don't need to keep growing and growing and growing. Having that attitude coming from your leaders gives him the backbone to be able to be like, listen, they are my boss.
We forget that government, especially in the commission position, government as a whole, you are a broker. You're not actually a producer of any services.
Of anything.
Yeah, exactly. You're taking finances from the taxpayer. Totally. You're finding a third party who can execute XYZ mission, and you're paying them to do so. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, as a broker, all you're doing is prioritizing finances, essentially.
Right. Yes.
So it comes down to those individual priorities, or I shouldn't say individual priorities. It comes down to a question of a collective priorities. Can you, as 5 commissioners, and you guys have 5 in the city, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So 5 commissioners in the city, whether you go over the county, 5 commissioners, can you as 5 people come together as a collective unit and say, hey, our unifying priority is going to be city steward, we're not going to raise taxes, or we're going to minimize taxes as bare minimum as possible. But on the commission side, for example, only 1 out of 5 commissioners made the statement that we want to see a 0 millage rate increase for 2024.
Right.
So that's your prioritization right there. You want to build out the bells and whistles, and you want to, be this new progressive city.
God forbid we actually lower taxes.
Oh, don't we?
God forbid we roll back.
I remember.
Whoa.
See, let me do the math.
It's impossible, right?
Was it 2022? It was the 2022 fiscal year. There was a ad valorem millage decrease in Martin County.
Right.
And I remember it was the first year that Don Donaldson was the administrator. I remember this. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, that's got to be a typo. I mean, there's no way we just had a millage rate increase. But because the home values had skyrocketed so much in that particular time period, we were able to pay for our services and still have that millage decrease. And I remember explicitly saying, I do not foresee this ever happening again in the near future. This isn't going to happen 2 years in a row. And it didn't. They went up. But it can happen. But
it should be the goal.
But is it your priority?
It should be your priority that when property values are high, you're rolling back.
Absolutely.
So that you have room
or
to
the
come
bare
back
minimum.
Up. Yeah.
I would even, at this point, looking at the entire picture, I'm even okay with property values continuing to grow and leaving millage rate as is. And instead of giving a millage rate decrease, I would like to, at this point, see our general reserves increase and see our budget or our debt decrease. Because this is what scares the,
Yeah, you shouldn't be running a lot of debt.
We have about 150 million is the debt in Martin County currently. We have $634 million is what our operating budget is for the year. So 150 out of 634.
Unless you're like on a
20%.
crazy cheap note, like our what is it? The Wells Fargo building is like a ridiculously cheap note. It's a tiny percent. It's like nothing.
Yeah, it's not.
But otherwise,
reasonable.
you really why are you carrying debt?
It's not reasonable to have, or it's not reasonable to expect zero debt. You got to borrow at some point, even just building up credit. I mean, for future loans you have an emergency in the future, you want to have some level of credit. So there's nothing wrong with having low interest rates notes, especially on items that are necessities. You guys are trying to move your governmental complexes into a larger facility that's more reasonable to the size of the government. So that's a somewhat of a necessity. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with borrowing on that. But when you have $150 million outstanding debt on a $630 million budget, that's what, 20%? And then here, you really want to get scared. So our general reserves are unrestricted emergency funds. This is if we have a real boo-boo. It's about $17 million. If you take a look at the warrant list for the most recent distributions, over a 2-week period, we spent $17 million. So we are really in some fiscally dire straits in the sense of if something really hits the fan, like the 2008 bubble crisis or the back-to-back hurricanes in 2004 where we had major outlays, we're self-insured on most of our structures in the county. So if we get pegged by 2 hurricanes back-to-back like we did in 2004, we have some major finances coming out of pocket that we simply don't have. So you're going to have to borrow money for that. Well, I mean, if you're already borrowed 20% of your yearly income, that's pretty concerning. I mean, look at what happens to the federal government where we're borrowed $30 trillion on a, $17 trillion GDP. I mean, we've borrowed twice as much than we take in on a yearly basis at the federal level, and Martin County government's quickly catching up to that ideology.
So clearly you're going to tighten up the ship a little bit.
We absolutely have to be preparing for the future. And that's...
Especially with the cost of everything going up.
We sit on the dais not we, but individuals sit on the dais, even if you're there for 20 years, which I'm a big believer in term limits, if for no other reason than somebody has new ideas that I haven't even thought of yet. So they need to come in and share them. But you're only there for so long. So yeah, it's great to build your legacy. You want to put a feather in your hat because whatever, that's your purpose. You know, I go home, my kids give me a hug, and that's all I need. My wife gives me a hug, that's what I need. So in 10 years, 15
you don't want
years,
to
20
be
years.
a paid consultant when you get out?
You know,
For some developer?
No, I'd be good with not doing that.
Yes.
I'll pass.
Okay.
How's that sound?
That seems like that's the way to do it.
Can I just go home to my farm and be left alone?
No.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'd like to do that now, but unfortunately, if I don't step up, my farm's gone. I mean, there's a lot of people that tell you, I got nothing left to lose, so I'm gonna run for.
How many apartments could we fit on that parcel?
You know, you joke about that, but this
fast
really,
forward 20 years.
This is what disappoints me.
10 years? I don't even know.
I'm not proud to say this, but this is reality. You know, I look at my house, I look at my land, and I think to myself, I'm like, you know what? I could, like most farmers, your land rich, your money poor. You're scratching it all together to make your bills. And I think to myself, it's a shame because this is the land that mom and dad learned to ride horses on. This is the land that grandpa used to ride his horses on. And this is where my girls learned to ride their horses on. And I think to myself, you know what? If something ever happens, my kids will be covered because I live inside the urban service boundary. So I know they can sell the farm and my kids will be taken care of.
But also don't ever sell the farm.
And that's it.
Don't sell the farm.
That's why I feel terrible.
Make a compound.
With that. You think I'm kidding?
I'm not. Make a compound like the old world.
We had buddies of ours that sold their house in St. Lucie and they couldn't afford to find a new one. And they bought a fifth wheel trailer. And I said, I'll tell you what, you install the electrical line, you pay the electrician to run it.
Yeah.
And then you plug that thing in. And when we get to the point where the power bill goes up higher and it aggregates higher than the cost of what you already put in the electric, then I'll start charging you for electric.
Yep.
And it was this was right after COVID started to tamper down and whatnot. It was some of the best days sitting on the porch, rocking chairs. And oh man, I miss those days. But,
having a fire.
I keep telling my folks, like, why don't you sell your house in Jensen? It says, you guys can come live at the house here. And we built our house. We talked off camera about generational living. But, I tell my folks, says, you guys can travel around. You guys retire, you got a house.
Don't sell the house. Airbnb the house.
Well,
rent the house. Don't sell the house either.
Well, that's it. We have these
come live with us,
but
rent the house. Somebody else.
Well, I'd love to see if my little brother would come back from Colorado, but I doubt he'll ever do that. So, but yeah, I mean, it's
because none of us can afford the houses today that we all live in.
No, absolutely not. You're barred it to the hilt, and it's
none of us could afford with the rates and the prices
and this.
Don't sell the house.
And this is why I personally love the idea of generational housing. We built it so my father-in-law could live with us when he was aging. Actually, the entire layout on the first floor of our house is a mirror to his house because he was getting to be a little bit older, and we wanted him to walk in the front door and he knows where the kitchen is, he knows where the restroom is, knows where the living room is, knows where his bedroom is. So I mean, this is the idea. And if I'm blessed and fortunate by God to have my children live in that house, and I get cripply and old, and they take care of Daddy in his old age, that's the greatest thing I could ask for.
What do you think are the main issues that? I mean, we'll just say in your district, right? District 5. What are the main issues that you feel like people are would be willing to take a risk and vote for you versus an incumbent?
So I think people, first and foremost, they see what they have. They've seen what the current commissioner has provided to them over the last 7 years. And there's some people that absolutely love Ed and will always vote for him. And if that is where your heart is, if you think that Martin County's gone in the right direction in 7 years, and that's who you want to support, then hey, I'm still going to have a beer with you on Thursday. Let's do this. Because I know that what my ideas are, it's important to me and it's important to a lot of other people. But that doesn't mean I represent or that I speak for 160,000 other people or the 38,000 in District 7.
Yeah, but in 5, what's bugging people?
If you were in 5 and you're looking at your property tax bill skyrocketing,
right,
and you're looking at your traffic's gotten absolutely out of hand, and you're looking at rampant development, not just inside the urban service boundary, but more importantly, the sprawl that's taking place outside the urban service boundary. If you're seeing these things and you're thinking to yourself, no, this isn't the right track.
Right.
That's why you want to get somebody in there that's going to ask a question instead of just rubber stamping. Staff said, let's do this. Let's roll with it. Or this is why you want to get someone in there that's going to ask questions in advance. Say, hey, let's plan our actions instead of reacting to them later down in the field. We can't continue to kick the ball down because we've seen what that's produced.
I think that's a good point I want to sidebar on is
sure,
when you're in that seat, right, the goal for whoever's in charge, right, Don, is trying to figure out how do we...
Yeah.
It's something everybody's going to feel good about. Like you end up having an influence before it ever even hits the LPA or, you're talking to the developer and the applicant. You're involved in that process of what even comes forward, which is sometimes why it can feel like it's just all yes votes and nobody has any say. But who you elect and who sits in that seat will have a lot of influence for what ultimately even comes in front.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at, I'm trying to think of a good project. Let's take a look at Costco, for example. Obviously we know Costco has a storied history in our community, ending up in Stewart, but originally being proposed in Palm City. So from the very get-go, you have this project that you start to hear whispers on. And before you get to, like you said, before you're getting in the LPA, you have people come forward and say, hey, listen, this is something I might be interested in. Or I'm going to give you a better example, actually. Let me scrap Costco for a few minutes. Let's look at Live Local Act.
Everybody's blood pressure come down a little. Oh, no, you're going to bring it back up?
There you go. No, we're going to really make your blood pressure go up. And I'm going to bring this up because this is actually a fun one. I have a recent example on this. So Live Local, we've had this for close to a year now, right? And currently there are 3 projects on the county side. I don't know anything about the city, but on the
amendment
side,
that they're doing is going to exclude the city based on the radius from an airport. I don't know if you caught that. It's the new amendment to SB 102. I think it's like 320.
See, I wasn't even talking about from the state level. There are 3 projects here in Martin County that they're not officially submitted as an official project. They're just rumblings at this point.
It's a crowbar. They don't really want to do that project because if you are the developer, you're going to get a loan for a project where you can't guarantee what the rent's going to be because the rent's going to fluctuate based on the median income of who's there.
Yeah.
So you're the finance department is going to be on the hook for no guaranteed rent price. Could be $1,500, could be $1,200, could be $2,000, could be $800.
You're making a commitment, a 30-year commitment on
this
too.
Nobody wants to do that. Not really. So, but they want to threaten it.
Absolutely.
Because you don't want 4x the density there, right? And they want to give you sort of political cover to be like, well, we don't want that, so we're just going to give them what they wanted anyway.
Well, and that goes back.
And then we're really not going to have much leverage to argue over if that could be less dense or the parking could be, or the traffic implications. We're just going to go ahead and say yes to that because we don't want this.
Well, and that goes back to that point earlier about
that's the rumbling.
They making the threat. What others say? Well, and that's it. But you hear in advance these rumblings coming up, right? So now you're engaged with somebody who, like I said, even if it is just a ploy. But at least now you're actively engaged with these people, say, okay, this may be something that comes up. So after that, you start getting these informal discussions so you can help shape their ideas before they get to an actual official application. And then you can
because they don't want to spend a bunch of money either and come forward and get a no. Absolutely. So they're trying to talk to you in the front end as well.
Exactly. Why would you invest $500,000 into blueprints and engineering if you're going to get shot down immediately?
Right.
It's a foolish endeavor. So you have those opportunities long before it comes in front of the commission to start shaping ideas and say, hey, sorry, I'm not your guy. Maybe go knock on the door next door, but I am not the guy. You're not getting that vote out of me. So you do have that position up front, which I think is a very powerful position to be in the sense that how you wield that. Let me add that caveat. How you wield that power is extremely important because if you tell somebody up front, we have zoning in place. This is the zoning that I support. And if you want something special, then you need to go talk to another door. You're talking to the wrong guy. We gave you the inch. I'm not giving you the mile. Don't waste your breath. We'll have a beer later if you want. That's cool. But I'm not giving you the mile. So that's the very powerful position to be in if you're not going to abuse it. And that came out terribly.
No, it didn't.
I don't mean to suggest anybody's abusing anything. That's not the implication. But this is an important thing to keep in mind.
I would frame it in the sense of you, in a way, don't exist or matter.
Exactly.
Except that you are the sort of, I don't know if nexus is the right word. You're the point of entry and engagement for all of the people.
Yeah.
I'm
a blackboard. I'm not a man. I'm a blackboard with chalk mark on it.
Your job is to just interface and say, I can't tell you exactly who's going to show up at that Tuesday meeting, but I can tell you because I just knocked on a bunch of doors.
Exactly.
And the people I'm talking to, I don't think this is the path or this is, I think if you're close, but if you did this, You think you're going to be better off.
Exactly. If you got 40,000 people.
And if you're bringing this in front of me, I can't vote for that because they don't want that.
No, if you got 40,000 people saying the same thing, you have 40,000 voices overlaying. Right. So it's consolidated into me.
Ultimately, it's not about you or me who's in the chair.
Yeah.
You're trying to be that icon that it's all flowing. All those voices flow through.
That's the purpose of being that representative.
Right.
I'm going out there saying if everybody listening today says, hey, I like this guy, he's on the money, then hey, I love to have your vote. If you think I'm an idiot and you don't want to support me, you're not going to hurt my feelings because I'm not here trying to exert my will onto anybody. I'm here to say, this is what is important to me. This is where I think we should be going. And if the majority of the populace says, I agree with that guy, he has in his head what is in my heart, then I'm out there to represent them. It's not Mike Syrkus up on the dais. That is 40,000 people from District 5 talking on the dais.
Something about that is, are you going door to door or do you have plans to?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Not yet. We're
getting our literature as soon as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be perfect, but when you go talk to the people who live here,
mm-hmm.
it is so enlightening. I felt like through all of those doors, I even developed what my platform was because I have my ideas of what's relevant to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then the more people you talk to, it just galvanizes, and then other things kind of fall away. Like, this is what's important.
Yeah,
this is what people are upset about or want to see more of. And so definitely knock on doors sooner than later. You don't have to have like the T-shirts printed or the door hangers. Just go talk to humans. You'll be surprised how much you gain from that for when you do interviews or debates or because you're
funny.
And that's something that I think incumbents lose track of because once you're in the seat, it's harder to unseat you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's less of an urgency. Like if you want to unseat an incumbent, you have to go door to door because people don't know who you even are. And so that face-to-face interaction will carry value that can't even be articulated through media or a mailer, right? So they lose track of that and they don't always go. So it's, and too, if and when you get elected, you have this cachet of conversations. You know exactly how people feel about things. And so you can just laser cut when there's a lot of like bloviating happening and just nonsense. Like, listen, stop. I just was banging on doors. I'm telling you, this is how they feel. This is not the right way to go. Or we are dead on. This is it. Do this. Yes.
It's so funny you should say that because I'm very blessed to have a core group, about 4 people that are very knowledgeable about what they're doing. They've been around town once or twice. They in the political scene. History. Yeah, well, I was gonna say not even the history so much, but they understand the political process. And they're like, hey, we got petitions we got to get signed, and the reality is fundraising. We got fundraising we got to do.
Yeah, you got money to raise.
And I'm like, which they're 100% correct. I don't challenge that one bit. But talking to people has been my priority number one because ultimately you can raise $1 billion, but dollars don't buy votes. I mean, I guess maybe if you're at the federal level, dollars buy votes.
Let me talk to you about money. Let's talk about money. So the money scales based on the number of humans that you need to get mailers to and the number of signs, but it's primarily mailers. After doing this one round, I've kind of realized where the money goes. You're going to have Facebook ads and different things, but it's the mailers because for this number of human beings, this is how much it costs to mail, print, produce these mailers.
Yeah.
So, in the city, a city seat, you hate to say it costs a certain amount of money, but for you to be able to reach out through conventional mail and doing mailers and signs and ads, you have to spend between 10 and 30 grand to communicate to people, that you exist and what your brand is. The county seat is going to cost between 60 and 100, purely to be able to contact and engage with enough people to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's pragmatically, you're 100% correct.
That's all it is.
Everything in life costs money. Right. That's a reality. But those mailers, what's the purpose of the mailer? To get somebody to vote. Right? To get them to the ballot box to click your name.
To show them that you even exist. Because for an incumbent, people know Ed Campy's name. They know, they may have different opinions about him. They may think he's great. They may think he's terrible. But there's security in knowing that person.
even if they think he's terrible, if they don't know who I am,
right,
they're just going to skip the box and undervote their ballot.
Yeah,
they'll worry about everything else.
The unknown is far scarier than even the terrible thing.
Absolutely.
Not that Ed's terrible, but if you have a terrible thing,
yeah, exactly.
The unknown is scarier.
Any name, it's just not him, but any name. So the money is necessary. You have to raise the funds to be able to get that message out. And that's the unique part of what I'm finding is when you're meeting with these people individually, even if it's individual or large groups, as I'm talking to folks, like these are the ones that are saying, hey, listen, I recognize you from the meetings. You're the guy that said X, Y, Z on this or that. People start to catch your eye, or you catch their eye. They know who you are. They hear your voice. They hear your message. And they're the ones that end up voting. It's not the dollar bill that checks off the box. It's the person.
Right.
And this is why it's been so important to me. My priority has been getting out to talk to people and say, hey, you got a book club? Let me talk to your book club. Let's go. Let's hang out. I had a fellow reach out to me on Facebook last week. He says, hey, listen, I'd love to get some petitions from you. He says, can we meet? I says, well, I'm working. I can meet you at the post office this afternoon. I ended up in an hour-long conversation with this fella, and it was great to be able to hear what was important to him. He had very specific concerns. Septic sewer ties in, but essentially getting fresh water supplied into the community. Mm-hmm. It was very important to him, and that was his take. But it's so funny when you sit there and you catch an hour conversation with somebody and you find out how many tertiary things that everybody has in their realm that all tie together into one core idea. Mm-hmm. And I know I've said it 100 times, and I know it sounds very blanket, but everybody comes back to the same thing: forward planning. His particular circumstance, it was something that they were told a half a decade ago was going to get underway. And now they're starting the ball all over again. They're starting back from scratch, with the difference being a cost for tie-in went from $6,000, $8,000 to $25,000. Right. So, and what's the one thing you'll never get back in this world? Money. Time. Oh, time. You will never. I mean, money. Yeah, it's hard to get money back with inflation, and there's no doubt about it. It's money's no easy feat anymore. But you will never get time back. So they lost a half a decade, and then watched the finances skyrocket by 4 times. I mean, that was huge to them, and all because of a lack of forward planning. So, I mean, it's funny how a lot of these individual ideas and individual priorities, so many of them fall back to the were you proactive and started addressing issues from the beginning, or did you just wait until it fell in your lap later and said, okay, we'll figure it out as it falls in the lap?
Do you know where the reclaimed water goes?
I do not.
See,
I know a lot of golf courses have signs up.
I had no clue about this, like where the wastewater goes, right? Mm-hmm. Because I have mixed feelings about septic to sewer. My positive, I don't think it's a clean, easy. There's you got to weigh it out.
Of course.
The pro to septic to sewer is you are taking those aged septic tanks, especially anywhere near the river, offline, and you're pulling that wastewater to the plant. Mm-hmm. So that's good, right? Mm-hmm. The negative is, where does the water go, right? Like, people don't. I didn't even think about it.
It doesn't magically
disappear. Just septic to sewer is good. Yeah. Take the water away.
Yeah.
Where does it go? Mm-hmm. Well, we take that water and clean out the sludge, that comes from the waste. But then we pump it. We treat it chemically, and then pump it back underground. Did you know that?
Deep well injected?
Yes. And not only us, West Palm's doing it. Every other municipality.
A lot of the state.
And not that I don't trust the people who told me that this is the way it works, right? Mm-hmm. But, the belief or the way it's communicated is there's different strata that in no way would ever mix. Right, so there's the strata we're
it's
pulling.
It's not going to be in the aquifer because we found the magic pocket where we're going to send it.
There's the earth is definitely not porous at all.
Yeah, not at all.
It has clear delineations, right? And so we take our water out of the superficial, we deep well inject it here, and now the RO plant, we're going to be pulling it from deeper brine or whatever. And there's no way that they mix, or that West Palms or Jupiter's or anybody else's gets anywhere near our water supply.
The irony that when you're sending it back down into the earth and it's going to stay there because it's not porous.
Right.
But we have to get rid of the septic tanks because the earth is porous and it all sinks down under it.
So I don't know.
To me on septic sewer conversion, the first thing I think about is where is it practical? You know, like I said, if you're talking about a lot
you're
of these
on the
years,
water.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you're on the water, especially quarter acre lots and these older communities, we have houses here from the 20s and 30s
Right.
that are on, you know, self-contained sewer systems. I get that. You know, that is an area where you want to concentrate your efforts. If you're talking about a farmer that's on 35 acres, 40 acres, or 100 acres, that's probably not a practical application.
Unless it flows into some sort of, you know, it's part of some BMAP, basin management, where it somehow ends up, you know.
But again, if you're talking like 300, if you're talking about 800-gallon tank on a 300-acre lot where the cows are running around doing their thing, the horses, and it's nothing but open land, it's still only an 800-gallon tank. Whether it's on a 300-acre lot or a quarter-acre lot, it's more concerning about where that lot is located. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you're on a huge plot of land, you're sitting on the C44 and you're draining into the C44. Right. That's obviously a very different part of circumstance. Some larger basin. Yeah, if you're abutted to Alapata Flats, on the other hand, it's a very different scenario. Mm. But even after you get past all that, the next thing that I look at is the sewer system itself. I think the state average is somewhere between 8 to 10% seepage rate out of the sewer systems.
Nice.
So if your sewer system,
it's like a giant septic tank.
Precisely. So if your sewer systems are already struggling at their current capacity, and this is an issue that we have, if you take a look at the budget, one of the first things they tell you is our aging infrastructure at capacity. So if you're already at capacity, then why don't we prioritize getting our sewer system back into functioning system and capable of taking on the increased capacity before putting the cart in front of the horse of the new septic or old septic tanks going into a sewer system.
And even larger, more macro. This is my main contention with CRAs is instead of trying to just redevelop, why not just focus on maintaining your roads, your existing sidewalks, your existing sewer? That's expensive enough, and we don't do it.
Yeah,
we just try to move into redevelopment phase and hope. And not that the city doesn't do it; they do it, but you know. Instead of trying to redevelop an area and have a CRA and just to bring, you know, high rises in, you know, just make sure the sidewalks are okay. Just make sure this is okay.
Last night, the county had a meeting last night for Parks and Recreation. They're working on developing the master plan for Parks and Rec from 2025 to 2034.
How'd that go?
You know, it's cool. They had these boards on the wall where you stick stickers on there to let them know what you want. And they had one that said equestrian and the other said dog park. And I just thought we should put a slash mark and had equestrian and dog because it was just a dog and pony show.
Yeah.
I was frustrated. I'm not gonna lie. My kids had church last night and usually I take them over there. I'm working on my master's. So I go home and do homework for a little bit before I pick them back up. And instead I went to this meeting and there was an absolutely packed crowd. Probably 3 times more people went to the master plan meeting last night than went to the comp plan meeting a week and a half ago. And standing room only. And people had they're pointed questions, but they were basic questions that could have been answered by anybody from staff. And we saw several staffers there. Yeah. But the workshop was being led by an out-of-state consultant who was hired to come in and develop this plan. Absolutely unprepared, didn't have any basic answers, and it boiled down to...
He probably didn't think he was coming into that kind of a meeting.
I think he was definitely surprised by what he walked into. And the meeting in itself turned out to be essentially a giant wish list. And that's where those little stickers came into place. You know, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? There wasn't a single option of maintain what
It'll be part of a PowerPoint that ends up coming in front of the LPA or the commissioner, whoever. With the little stickers, but
blew my mind at one point, and this had to have been a Freudian slip. Blew my mind. He said, "We put together a proposal for staff to implement." I'm like, whoa! You put together for staff to? You meant to say that as a paid consultant, you put together a package that will be debated by the commission, inquired amongst the staff, and we'll collectively decide whether this was right. Now, staff's going to implement this,
and so.
Okay,
exactly. So that's all right. So I call this an anchor. Okay, the anchor is the best way to win the negotiation.
Okay,
in an open field, right, in an open sea, wherever you put the anchor is now the position that you have to try to sway off of. It could be anything.
I'm following you. Yep.
So whatever you ultimately want to have happen, that's where you put the anchor. And if it gets drifted off a little bit here and
deviate by 1% here or there. Yep.
The anchor is whoever starts the conversation and says, "What about this?" That's the anchor now.
So That's essentially
from a negotiation standpoint.
So that's essentially what it was. They said, give us your wish list. We are going to set to use your analogy, we're going to set the anchor.
Right.
And that's exactly what it was. And
it'll be the anchor plus a couple bells and whistles, but it's the anchor.
Exactly. And that's precisely, everybody's got their flavor of the week, right? So pickleball was very well represented last night. And it was really interesting to see. There's a young lady that had a statement about tennis, right? She's a tennis player. She didn't want to see her tennis courts in Langford Park converted over to pickleball. And the volume of people, to the presenter's credit, the consultant's credit, he had to interrupt everybody and say, listen, it's a hot issue going here, but let's be adults about it. Let the lady say her piece. And I looked at a friend of mine, and she said, pickleballers won't even be here in 5 years. I said, that's right. I said, that's right. Says they're all going to be killed off in the great tennis versus pickleball war of 2028, apparently. I mean, that's how thick the animosity was in the air over this.
People are serious about pickleball.
Well, but that's their flavor of the week. And that's great. If that's what you're into, I love it. Knock yourself out. But you know what? Everybody else has got a flavor of the week too. And if we're using government dollars to finance that, remember, you're not paying for your vanilla. You're paying for the strawberry and the chocolate and the mint chocolate chip and everybody else's flavor as well. Mm-hmm. So this is where that prioritization we talked about earlier. If you can't walk into a meeting and just say, hey, man, throw me your wish list. We're going to make this happen. That's absolutely nonsensical. You have to start from some type of pragmatic standpoint of, I asked the question. I said, you're a paid consultant. You just told us you've done this for Flagler County and listed off another set of municipalities.
Listen, man.
I said, tell me where we compare to other like-sized communities. Are we high on the hog? Are we playing catch-up? I said, before we can establish a wish list, why don't you put into perspective, where do we even stand? I couldn't tell you that.
Pickleball is such a violently heated thing. You should probably make it a referendum item to take the political heat off of you.
but there's an issue in that too.
Let everybody just vote what they want.
But now excuse me. I'm going to just destroy this microphone before we're over.
It's robust.
I talk with my hands. I might be Italian. I don't know. But anyhow, so pickleball, if you put it as a referendum, now you're allowing the very vocal minority, because keep in mind, a minority of people show up to the polls. You take a look at our voter turnouts. Not every adult is registered to vote because some people just simply don't get involved. Not every voting registered individual in the county shows up to vote, because even in that group, you have a shrunk down populace of people too. So now you're allowing the vocal minority, which may turn out to be a statistical majority on that ballot, you're allowing them to have their say. And I'll give you an illustration. Last night on those boards, pickleball was absolutely loaded. I mean, there's 150 people showed up, and pickleball was the absolute majority of people. And that's all well and good. But if you stack a room with 150 people and you told the pickleballers to show up and be ready to fight your fight, then you have a vocal minority standing up for something that's important to them. So you got to ask that priority. Do we want the pickleballer constituency? Is that the entirety of the constituency of the county? Or is having a reasonable sized Parks and Recreation department, not overbloated, not so heavily inflated that everybody's flavor is attended to?
You're going to have the pickleball.
Which of the two are you going to have?
You're going to have the pickleball mafia after you, man.
I know, apparently. Hey, listen, pickleball people, my goal is to keep more tax dollars in your pocket so you can afford to play pickleball wherever you like.
So what's another tenet of your campaign? We talked about being fiscally responsible.
We talked about finance. We talked about some sprawl.
Heritage. In our development.
If I had three main
scaling
things.
Scaling back CRAs.
If I had one last thing, one main tenet that we hadn't covered yet, it's developing that next generation. And this kind of ties into the heritage. But ultimately, like I said, I'm big on term limits. So at some point, I'm gone. 4 years if I'm blessed. I don't know if I'd run again or not. So 8 years, absolute max. That's good for Washington. That's good enough for me.
My mindset is it depends on the condition of the leadership at that moment. If you feel like the county's good to go, or if I feel like the city's good to go, there's past commissioners who would take breaks. Take 2 to 4 years off, take 8 years off if you need to come back.
The old Teddy Roosevelt.
If it gets messy, come back, And
and by all means, I can appreciate that position, and that's why I've put it incumbent upon myself as well as those around me to develop that next generation. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to sit on the dais for 20 years, or I don't have to be there for 8 and then take 4 and then come back in 12. Instead of doing that, I want to develop that next generation to recognize these are the reasonable expectations of what we want from our government, or these are the These are the restraints that we should be keeping our government in. I want to develop that next generation to keep that same ideology I have. This way, it's not me. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I don't want all this to go to naught.
That's a tenet of your campaign, though?
That is a tenet of my campaign.
So what would you implement to...
So what we're doing is trying to get people, or to help educate people and get them engaged as well. So we talked about the pickleballers showing up and voting. So I want everybody to show up and vote. I want to see a higher...
Show up and vote or come to the meetings? What do you mean?
All of it. I want them showing up and being actively engaged in their government.
Generally, I will tell you that people don't... Well, they don't have time, man. Like them...
It's a big ask.
Yeah, it is. Them voting for you is like they've done their job.
You know, if you surf through the county emails, right? You surf through the county emails, you'll find
unless they're upset, unless somebody's messing with their neighborhood, and understandably so, or they want pickleball to be in the park or whatever. For the most part, you know, people might check in on an article in the paper, or they kind of keep tabs on what's going on, but you will not usually see them
and that's
physically there.
Well, and that's it.
They'll email you, maybe call you, you know, and let you know how they feel.
But even emails, if you take a look, there's usually a very select group of people that are sending emails and getting involved. You know, you don't see a whole lot of requests going to the commissioner saying, hey, listen, we think what you're doing is absolutely terrible, and I'm the president of XYZ HOA. I'd like to see you come out and present this case to our people. You know, tell us why it is that we need to be buying this, or vice versa. Say, hey, man, we love what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. Can you do us a favor? Come out here and educate those in the community around us to make this happen. You know, getting that two-way communication and getting that engagement, because we do look at the county commission hall and say, okay, it's empty, so people aren't engaged. Well, that's not always the case.
They're listening, but they're not there.
Exactly, because they got jobs, they got families, they got things they got to do. But there's so many other ways to get engaged in the community. You don't have to just...
That's why I'm trying to do this, so people can access and have info and know what's going on.
This is a perfect example, you know,
because having to be there.
You're creating... This right here creates that next generation of people. They're going to turn around and be like, you know, yeah, I'm sitting here in my office, but I got my podcast I'm listening to simultaneously because I can double task now. And they're getting engaged with what's going on around them. They can understand... Okay, this is on the horizon.
These are the issues. Yeah, this is what's going on.
This is what I need to see coming in the future. So let me start paying attention to this as well. You know, actions just like this are just as important as showing up to a meeting every 2 weeks. Getting those people engaged just at the base level, getting them to do it means in 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. I think 12 years is the city's capped out, right?
Yep, you got 3 terms.
So after 12 years, how much of a blessing is it to turn around and be like, you know what? Carl over here, that's my man. I said, this guy, he knows what's up. He's educated about it. His heart's in the right place. He can have my ball cap. Let's roll with this. I endorse this guy. How much of a blessing would it be to have that next generation stepping up to the plate to carry on the same mission you've already instituted? Because otherwise, everything you do goes to naught, or you're forced to stick around forever. You know, those are your 2 options. And I want to know that, you know, if I'm there for 4 years or 8 years, I want to know that our mission does continue. It wasn't a waste of time, because then you've gotten the people's hopes up and you've gotten nothing accomplished, especially since a lot of our problems, they are multi-generational issues. I mean, we've dug ourselves a hole over 20 something years. So it's not going to be solved in 4, not going to be solved in 8. I mean, it's going to take time to solve. So we need to get that next generation of people engaged, educated, and willing to take up the mantle when the sun sets on my time.
It's interesting with the way municipal government works, because you have 5 people, and then those people are changing, right? So it's like this cake that each, I don't know, even decade you could say, like, it's so different. It's this hodgepodge of what was allowed and what was sought after and what was encouraged, and you end up, it's like this really awkward
and to go back to your statement earlier about how the city of Stewart, for example, you guys have this fairly uniformed idea about taxes, right? So
with the CRA.
I'm sorry?
With the CRA, you mean?
Well, you're just talking about the finances, trying to keep your taxes from increasing year over year.
Running a tighter ship, yeah.
Exactly. So, but all 5 of you have very specific ideas on other I don't want to say micro, like unimportant.
But somehow we converge on taxes. I don't know how, but
on the macro, the big one, you guys come together. So taking that cake analogy, as a constituent in the city of Stewart, you're not getting just the top layer, the bottom, or the middle. You're getting a full slice of cake.
Yeah, tax-wise, you're more protected.
Well, even everything altogether, whether it's taxes or everything, you're getting the full slice of cake. So if you have sardines on one level and strawberries under it, you go to take a bite, you're not going to enjoy yourself. As a collective unit, the 5 of you got to come together to make sure that cake is a palatable flavor.
I'll give you a specific example. Is prior to me, the commission with Merritt Matheson and Mike Meyer, that 4 years that preceded me, there was an active campaign to try to increase residential units sort of by any means necessary. So what you're seeing with SB 102, the city did that 4 years ago and was actively doing that, converting industrial land and commercial land into apartments. And so and I would call it a vocal minority that was, they would come in and
pushing
and rail for affordable housing. And in my opinion, it's a much larger issue than a local issue, because Stewart's not affordable, Martin County's not affordable, Florida's not affordable, the United States isn't affordable. That's a larger macroeconomic issue. So locally, just about all you can do is increase what at some point will become low-income housing, the number of low-income housing units. And you should want to, rentals in particular, and what you should want to do is have a supply of rentals, but we approved dramatically the number of rentals. In 4 years, we approved 3,000 units, which in a population of 16, 17,000 people represented like a 30%, 5,000 people are now living in rental apartments. And none of those units that came online could somebody own and truly hedge. You want to talk about affordability, being able to hedge against inflation and whatever comes.
Yeah, having some type of tangible item that you can offset.
Even if you have a mortgage.
If you're paying somebody's profit, you're not taking ownership. You're paying a profit.
The unintended consequence, because you can't do rent control in Florida, and these guys were trying to do a certain thing, the unintended consequence is when you bring 3,000 apartments online in the middle of an inflating economy, that concrete costs more and metal costs more and wood costs more and just paying people costs more, you're not going to bring into existence an affordable unit.
No, you're not going to.
Every one of those apartments started at, around $2,000 and up.
Yeah.
So $2,000 to $3,500, $4,000 for living space. Now you've created a new anchor for what the cost of an apartment is in Martin County.
Yeah.
So over the same time period,
so now the costs have gone up by 600% when they go down by 8%. You're like, ooh, a savings.
Is if you had a rental apartment, right? Yeah. I lived across the street over here, and it was $1,500 a month, which at the time I thought was insane. Like, oh my god!
Now it's
I'm across the street from my office. That's worth it, I guess.
Now it's a bargain.
Now that same unit is probably $2,500. Yeah. Because all of the apartments, when you go to look for an apartment online, are that much money. So for a certain amount of square footage and a certain amount of bedrooms equals a price. And so you unintendedly screwed up and increased. You made Stewart less affordable.
So we look at this.
And harder to navigate with traffic.
Yeah.
And more expensive to maintain from a municipal standpoint, because the more people you put in here, the more expensive it is.
Oh, yeah. It takes
it's
a lot
not
of
linear.
Cost.
It's parabolic.
It's exponential.
Right.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, I work in construction. We use this analogy a lot. You take a look at a piece of plywood, right? So after all the building that came up out of COVID, plywood went up to $80 a sheet.
Right.
And it went from $20 a sheet to $80 a sheet, and then came down to $50. And everybody's like, well, it's $50. It used to be $80, so it's a savings. Like, that's not a savings. It used to be $20. Now it's $50. Right. So over 36 months, it's not a savings. It's a sliding ideology, though. And this is why I try to look at affordability not by what the price point you're trying to achieve, but instead how much you're keeping in somebody's pocket. $1,500 unit goes up to $2,500, right? Well, if you have more money in your pocket because you're not spending it all in your excessive taxation, or if you're not spending through the nose for, obviously there's very few things we can do about it.
That is an appropriate space for government to consider, right?
It's the only one they can.
Not increasing their taxes, okay? Yeah. Affordable housing sounds like a noble cause. I'm a chiropractor.
Yeah.
It would be great for everybody to have chiropractic care. Do I think that the municipal government should offer chiropractic stipends. It'd be great for business, right? It would help people.
Until you remember you're paying yourself.
Yeah. It would help people.
Yeah.
But is that the role of government?
Exactly.
Is to make sure everybody's healthy? Municipal government's job is not to create or advocate for affordable housing or chiropractic stipends or any. It's sewer, trash, navigable roads.
Yeah.
Don't overdevelop.
Fire, police.
Police. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is like we talked about earlier with government being brokers. I mean, they're not producers, they are brokers.
Right.
So what do brokers do? They take their fee in the middle. So, I mean, government doesn't achieve affordable housing. That is a misnomer by every stretch of imagination.
But you know what they can do?
But they can make all your housing unaffordable for
you.
you.
They can make all your commercial and industrial space where people will be able to work and afford to be able to live here, disappear, and become apartments.
So you look at the cost of living in Martin County, and a lot of people don't recognize Martin County is the third highest taxed county, or third highest tax resident out of all 67 counties.
Wow. I didn't know
Martin County is number 3. And arguably, if you start getting into a lot of our supplemental taxes, your fuel sales and all that, we could be there are years where we're up there number 1. And the county likes to justify the high cost we have in Martin County because, well, we have this high volume of service, this high volume of luxury and all that, and a high dollar clientele. And they say our per capita income is $100,000. Well, okay, per capita income $100,000. If you have one person with $1 million salary and 9 of them are slaves and get $0, all 10 have a per capita income of $100,000. That's a law of averages. That's just how finances work. So I like to take a look at the median household income.
Right, AMI.
Keeping in mind that median household income is a dual income in the United States of America. Median household income in Martin County is somewhere in the $70,000 to $75,000 a year area. So, I mean, that's 2 incomes. So if we're going to spend money hand over fist like everybody's got a $100,000 salary a year, then that has that downhill effect of driving up the appraised value of everything else. So everybody thinks we're in the Hamptons. Everybody thinks we're all living high on the horse. So we're going to pay all that extra money. That's why the same house in St. Lucie County is half the cost of what it is here in Martin. I mean, a huge difference in cost of living. And that appraised value has other supplementary effects that do come into play. You look at insurance, right? So the insurance on your house is based on the value of your house. So if you're trying to insure a house at $500,000 because that's the rebuild cost here in the county, then that's a whole different financial aspect that the county has no direct effect on, but absolutely has an effect on it. You know, we can say we have no regulation of insurance, and we don't. The county has no regulation of insurance, but we can regulate this perception that everybody's a millionaire in Martin County and we're going to spend the money as such, because that drives up home values that are not necessarily a reasonable home value, which in turn has that effect on your insurance rates as well. So, I mean, a lot of these little things, it chaps me a bit that we pretend that we are this ultra rich community, and we have great people in this county that have some money in their pocket, and I'm happy for them. But the majority of us, we're a tourism economy here. You know, a lot of us are working restaurants, we're working hospitality and whatnot. We don't have $1 million salaries. So our government can't continue to spend the money and in return tax you as if we are all these ultra millionaires.
All right, I got some nuggets pulled up here.
Oh.
So U.S. Census, because I think this is interesting. All right, so just on housing.
Look at the poverty line if you want to get interested.
Yeah, it is too. That's one of them.
One out of 10, I believe.
Martin County, the median value of a home, $359,000.
What year is that? Just so I can get my mind's eye on that.
It's a census, so it's got to be last year, whatever the last census was.
The 2020 census got bumped to 2021 for COVID. It's 2024, so I presume they had to have published those results by now.
I don't know. 22? Vintage 22?
Okay, 22. So yeah, so within the last 24 months. So the median household value was $359.
$359 in Martin County as a whole. $496 in Palm City. The city of Stewart's $276.
Now that's an interesting.
Yes, it is. And then Port St. Lucie is $292. In terms of rent, yeah, this is way off. Because it shows Martin County's $1,300 for rent.
No, not even close. I like to look at the realtor numbers, the most recent numbers. I think the average right now.
And these are not okay. So these are not, and that's gross rent from 2018 to 2022. But these are not like what houses are selling for. It's the value. So it's like the last assessed taxable value of a home.
So now, this is where things
Which
get
I
really
wonder if
sticky.
that even includes homestead exemption too.
I was just going to say, this is where it gets sticky because your appraised value is going to be extremely different from your taxable appraised value.
Right.
Very different from what the appraised value of the structure is, especially in a place like Martin County where we have a lot of people that use portability to bring over their values from other previous residences, mostly out of the county when they come to retire.
Income and poverty?
Oh, all right. I
so
know
median household, this is 2018 to 2022 in 2022 dollars. Median household income for Martin County is $77,800. Port St. Lucie $75,000. So you do get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of housing price.
Mm-hmm.
Stewart, City of Stewart is $61,800, and then Palm City is $111,300. In terms of persons in poverty, Martin County's percentage of persons in poverty is 10%.
Yep.
Port St. Lucie's is 8%.
Now let's highlight that for a second. So you look at persons in poverty, and we just discussed the cost of living significantly lower in St. Lucie, yet the median income was what, $2,000 off, $75,000 versus $77,000. So you're getting that big bang for your buck, like you just said, which has that downhill effect. If it costs that much more to live here and you're only making marginally more, you have that increased poverty level.
And then City of Stewart is 13.9, so almost 14%.
For poverty?
Yeah. And then Palm City is 4.8.
There is.
So Palm City's rocking.
Yeah.
You got a good district, man. You should be able to raise plenty of contribution funds in Palm City.
And again, I don't hate on anybody for having the means. I wish you the best, and that's great to you. But we cannot all go around spending money as a government as if everybody has that 100,000 or so that Palm City has. And I'll tell you right now, for anybody listening, there's a lot of people that know me around town, so you know that is not the case for me. My wife is a nurse, and we're very blessed that she's the fiscal breadwinner of our household. I'm a carpenter, and I sweat for my money, and I get paid.
She's your sugar mama?
Yeah. This is a kid-friendly radio. I can't say that. No, she gets compensated well as a nurse. She's been with the system for 10 years or so.
Good gig.
Although, ironically, if she were to quit today and get rehired, she'd probably make more per hour just because.
It's a strange thing about the current economy. You're best just like switching jobs.
That's why people
trying to get
around.
a raise. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why
better to
people
leave and go somewhere else and get an incentive to come in.
That's it. Well, we wonder why we have the building department, for example. There's a lot of temporaries, and I know a lot of guys have been trying to pull permits that it's a very different scenario today than it was 10 years ago, which again, you create that issue. How do you compensate people? Especially here in Martin County.
I got one more nugget for you. So
nugget me.
This is kind of what you were talking about with multi-generational. So persons per household.
Okay.
Right. So Martin County has 2.3. Port St. Lucie has 2.8, which I think that's a lot. That's a pretty big jump, man. Half a human.
Well, see, now I wonder what the caveats is.
2.1, and then Palm City's 2.5. So I don't know what that means. Maybe there's more apartments in the city.
I don't know. I'd have to dive into those nuggets because it's like I said, you can't divide a person in half. So it's curious to see, because I would presume that when you talk about people per unit, it's a very different scenario whether you have single family residences versus rental apartments versus condominiums. All this stuff, because of course you got different demographics jumping into each one. But I'm a huge proponent of generational housing. I think there's so many downhill benefits that come from it, not just social, where you have that increased familial structure. I mean, you and I kind of talked about this off camera a little bit, but so it becomes a question of whether this is something that's done by necessity or something by desire.
Yeah, you want it to be choice.
So yeah, exactly. It has to be. You don't want to be forced into living with mom and dad because you can't afford to do otherwise.